Hey everyone, welcome back to Ontario Gardening. We are at the beginning of March and seed starting is going to be starting any day now. So I thought we would head into the greenhouse and just take a look at the super easy way that I do it and easy ways that you can do it that would be inexpensive. You don't need a lot of special tools. I'm going to show you 2 different ways and hopefully this helps somebody who is just beginning their gardening journey or has never started seeds inside. So the first thing I'm just going to tell you are the items that you're going to need, your basic items. That's going to be containers to grow in, and you can use either recycled materials or materials that you buy. Soil, your seeds obviously, watering can or a watering agent, and labels, because nothing's more important than labeling things that you have started so you know what you're doing. Optional items, if you're looking to have a little bit more of an advanced setup or you do have a little bit of cash to spend to get your setup going, which does help. It's not necessary, but it definitely helps the process. Those items would be things such as a heating mat, growing lights, a fan, and fertilizer for your soil. So let's just talk about the first thing, and that is the containers that you're going to want to choose. So there's many options. You can use red Solo cups, recycled materials such as yogurt containers, the bottoms of egg cartons. This underneath here, if you're growing, if we're putting soil all in instead of doing individual plants, say you were doing onions and you were doing like a seedling sprinkle of onions, you can use containers. This is an old lettuce container from the grocery store. So if you want to be thrifty and inexpensive, definitely that is an option as long as you have drainage holes drilled into the bottom so that the water can drain out of those containers, you are solid. The other thing that you can do is purchase different things from dollar stores, nurseries. I've saved containers from nurseries over the years, so I do have these little containers here. These are at the dollar store. They're 10 for $1. These are great. You've got these options here. The one thing I do have to say with starting seeds is a lot of seeds you're starting about 8 to 10 weeks in the house prior to transplanting out. So you can start your seeds in little containers like these. But what happens is once they start getting their sets of leaves and they start growing and the roots start getting bigger inside of the pot, you have to up pot them into a bigger container so that they don't go root bound and you're able to feed them properly and they're able to get strong and healthy. So for me personally, in the past, I have done all these little containers and then I've had to transplant them all. And I'm just sick of doing that. So I am just starting right from a bigger container. This one's perfect. These are going to start the plants from small and it's able to grow in this container and I won't have to transplant them. Now the only thing with that is it's a little bit trickier to keep watered. So you want to make sure that the soil is staying moist and so that those seeds can germinate. The other option is when I first started gardening, I used these all the time. These are these little Jiffy pucks. So what happens is you're going to put your seed in the middle of the Jiffy puck. You're going to pour water over top of this. These Jiffy pucks expand. You put your little greenhouse lid on top and basically they germinate in here. Once the seeds have popped up, you take this off and you can supplement your lighting and warmth from there. So that's another option. So this kit I believe was $14.97 and it would, allow you to start 36 plants in here because this is a 36 cell container. So the other thing you can get from the dollar store are these. I think they come 2 in a pack. So you've got your bottom tray and then your top. And so basically what happens is this acts as a little mini micro greenhouse. So when you have your seedlings and your plants in there, so here, I'll just show you here. We are going to have our seeds in our pot in here. You would put it in, all lined up in here. And then you're going to add the lid. This traps the condensation in it, keeps it moist, keeps it warm, helps those plants to sprout, and then once they sprout, you take this off and let them breathe. Now you don't necessarily need these containers from the dollar store or anything, but you do want a tray underneath your containers because you're going to drill holes in them for drainage. You need that water to drain out. You don't want water to just sit and pool in your seedlings because that will cause root rot and honestly sometimes will drown out the seeds and won't even let them germinate. So you want to have something underneath those containers so that it's going to catch the water, and you can, if you want, bottom water instead of watering on the top, but we'll get to that in a minute. So that's talking about containers and ways that you can start your seeds. The next thing we're going to talk about is the soil. So there are many different companies that do seed starting potting mix. There's lots of debate about this. When I first started gardening, and even still, you can just use a potting mix, so like soil. You can buy the potting mix in bags. You're just looking for, the thing with this seed starting potting mix is it's supposed to be enriched with different nutrients and mixed with the right combinations of like peat moss and whatnot to help your plants. You're just looking for light and fluffy soil. So as long as your potting mix is light and fluffy, it's not dense. You don't want dense soil, because if you have dense soil, once you water it, it's basically smothering your seeds and it's not going to allow them to germinate as well. You want to make sure that the roots can grow. So yes, light and fluffy. So what I'm going to do this year, I have a little bit of this left over from last year. I didn't buy any more because that does get quite expensive to buy little bags like this of seed starting mix. I'll take you out to the garage and show you what I'm actually using. I'm going to mix this with some Pro Mix potting soil that was much cheaper, and I'm going to make that mix. So I'll just take you and show you that real quick. So these are the bags of Pro Mix that I got. These were at Costco. They're equivalent to 4 bags. It's a big value size. This was $17.99. So I'm going to use this premium organic vegetable and herb mix. It's a potting soil. So I'm going to mix that with some of that seed germination soil just to kind of use the rest of it up. But again, it's light and fluffy soil. It's got a little bit of peat in it. There are recipes out on the internet if you wanted to make your own seed starting soil. We're trying to make this as easy as possible. I am not that advanced. I just want a simple, easy way to garden, and that's what I'm trying to help you guys do, is an easy and efficient and, potentially more inexpensive way. So it's, like I said, a good, fluffy, light potting soil, you're good to go. So now that we've talked about the containers and the soil, we're going to talk about the seeds. So when you buy your seeds, each plant is going to tell you on the back, usually on the back of your seed packet. So we've got our seed packet here. On the back, it will usually tell you when to start inside. So for these tomatoes, you want to start them indoors 6 to 10 weeks before your last frost. Heat mat helps to warm soil and speed germination. Not necessary, but that's just giving you some tips. So with that being said, there's also a really trusty tool on johnnyseeds.com. I will link it below. And basically you go in, you put your last expected frost date. If you don't know when that is, you can look it up online, either Google your city and last frost date, or you can go on the Farmer's Almanac and it'll tell you you type in your city, you find your city, and it'll tell you your zone and when your last expected frost date is. You type that in to the Johnny's calculator, and it's going to literally give you a list of all the different fruits and vegetables, and it's going to tell you when to start your seeds inside and when you can plant them outside. So I've already looked at that tool and I've recorded it in my garden journal, my garden planner. I do have a video for this garden planner if you're interested on the channel. I'll link that down below as well. So for example, we're going to be starting our tomatoes and our peppers in the next week or two. So I've got that recorded down there, and it just kind of keeps you on track and lets you know when you're supposed to start these things inside. So it's a nice tool for new beginners who just don't know when to start things, or maybe have questions about when to start things and when to put them outside. Okay, so we have got some soil and we're going to plant a seed. The rule of thumb, I guess, for planting seeds is you want to plant them as deep as they are wide. So for planting tomato seeds, they're pretty little. So we're just going to make a little divot in the soil, and you're going to place the seed in and then cover it up a bit. And that's pretty much it. You don't want it too deep for tomatoes, for example. Now for watering these seeds, you have 2 options. If you can go across the top and lightly sprinkle down some water and make sure that all the soil gets a good watering without moving that seed or displacing that seed, you can do that. the easiest way, instead of a watering can, because a watering can can put so much pressure out, I have seen people take a water bottle, screw the lid on and poke holes in the top of the water bottle, and that creates like a nice light shower as opposed to just dumping water on the top. So for me personally, from past experience of misplacing and displacing seeds, I have learned to bottom water. And bottom water is basically you've got these holes drilled or have come in the bottom of your containers, and that's why it's so important to have this tray underneath. And you pour water into the bottom of the tray and you allow for the soil to soak up that water. That's a little bit tricky. Bottom water is tricky for beginners just because you have to make sure that that soil is staying moist in order for like the shell of the seed to crack. So you really have to keep an eye on the moisture level, especially towards the top where your seed is. So bottom watering might not be for you if you really want to make sure that that seed's getting germinated. Play around with it, experiment, whatever you feel comfortable with is the way to go. You could do both. You could do a light watering on the top, and then once you've got the soil wet, continue to bottom water after that. Totally up to you. Pop the lid on, the plastic lids here for that greenhouse effect, and you're gonna let it go to work. So if you don't have lights or a heating mat or any of that kind of fancy stuff, when I first started gardening, I used to put all of my seedlings on the, well, first of all, I used to use these, and I would put this tray once it was done on the top of my fridge, and that way the top of the fridge is warm, and the top of the fridge would kind of give that warmth for the seeds to germinate. And once they sprouted, I moved them to a windowsill, a bright windowsill, left them there all day, and at nighttime I would move them actually to the top of my stove and turn the exhaust fan or the exhaust light on and let that light there, because you want your seedlings to get about 14 to 16 hours of light each day, and then 8 hours off. So that was perfect. And honestly, I started my first couple gardens that way. I had no expensive lights, no germination mats, no fancy setup, nothing like that. And it worked. I had great harvests, and I actually used dollar store seeds, and I had great success with the first couple of gardens. So if you don't have lights or anything like that, your next step is before you start, I should have said this, before you even put your lid, before you even do anything, make sure each plant is labeled with what it is. Nothing is more important than labeling, especially like if you're growing 10 different types of tomatoes, you're gonna wanna know what each variety of tomato is. So I've made that mistake in the past of not labeling, and then I'm trying to figure out as a new gardener what each thing is as I'm putting it into the garden, and it's been a hot mess. So tricks for labeling, and in a super inexpensive way is to just grab popsicle sticks, write on there with pencil. I have used Sharpie, pen, things like that in the past, and I find that once the moisture hits it, it starts to bleed. So pencil is the way to go. Pencil doesn't smudge off, it doesn't bleed when it gets wet. The other option is, if you want to go fancier, I've got these plastic labels, and I'm going to try this year. I got these on Amazon for I think like $5. And then I've got this gardening pen. I'm going to try this year, see how this works. So it's supposed to be UV proof, so it won't fade in the sun, waterproof. So we're gonna try that, but either way, make sure you're labeling. Even in the past, I've used just a piece of tape and put on the side of the container what it was with a piece of tape, just to keep myself organized. And so yeah, after that, we just wait. The back of that seed packet typically will tell you how long it takes to germinate. The one I just showed you there, the Abe Lincoln, it takes 7 to 10 days to germinate. So definitely be patient. There are some types of seed that can take a couple weeks. Cucamelons, if you've ever tried growing those can take 2 to 3 weeks to germinate. So just be patient. They will come. As long as you're keeping the soil moist, you should be good to go. And you've got that warm environment and you're creating that moisture and a nice place for those seeds to crack open, you shouldn't have too big of an issue. Now, once your plants start to sprout, you're gonna wanna come in here once a day maybe. You're gonna take that lid off, let them breathe, make sure they're getting their light and their water every day, and just kind of run your hands over the newly started plants. And this mimics wind, so you can use a fan. but it mimics the wind and it creates stronger stems and in stalks and roots because it's kind of mimicking being outside. So just come run your hands lightly along them once a day or once every couple of days to kind of give them that outside feel, and it definitely promotes stronger plants. So if you have planted, again, the back of the package will tell you. So if you've planted tomato seeds, you've planted 2 to 3 seeds per pod to kind of ensure you're going to get at least one seed to germinate. So you're planting your seeds, you've now maybe got 3 poking out of the soil. At this point, you're going to want to thin 1 or 2 of them off. So the weaker plants, it's scary, people hate doing it. You have 2 options. You can either thin those out, pluck them out very gently and plant them in a new container and hope they survive, or you can just throw them out. But the moral of the story is you only want 1 plant per container to be in there because you don't want them fighting for nutrients and lights and all that kind of stuff. And when you transfer them over, you only want to transfer into your garden 1 plant at a time. So that was important to mention as well. So you're going to want to do that once the plants get either a couple sets of leaves or they get, about no more than 6 inches tall. You'll know when it's time. And you can, like I said, either pinch them off, or some people actually just take a pair of scissors and cut it right at the soil. That should kill it off, no problem. At this point, once you've got your plants to a certain height, you can you can choose to fertilize your soil and feed that plant if you feel it's necessary. If you see your plant and it looks like it's struggling, if it's changing color, you could add some fertilizer. I personally never have in the past. This is the first year I'm going to try it and see if it makes a huge difference. If you've got good soil, quality soil, and you've taken the care to take care of these plants, you really shouldn't have to fertilize before you put it in the garden. But a lot of people do. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, by all means, I'm going to try this year, after recommendations, this fish emulsion fertilizer. So it's not a super heavy fertilizer, so it would be great for startlings, and yeah, I'm going to try that, but again, not necessary. I never have in the past, and my plants have thrived no problem. And that's pretty much it. Once your seedlings get to 8 to 10 weeks, you're going to start about a week before you are going to put them outside. You're going to start hardening them off, and that's basically getting them ready to go outside. I have a whole separate video. Again, I will also link that down. It talks about hardening off your plants. It's basically when you've got plants that have been warm and cozy inside and they're not used to outside elements, you want to slowly integrate them outside before just planting them right in the garden, because you do have a higher risk of the plants just dying off if you shock them like that. So there's a whole video on it. It just takes about a week of kind of bringing them in and outside every day. You harden those off and you should be good to go. So I will talk quickly about lights and heating mats. So all of those optional things I was telling you about, if you want to, again, spend a little bit more money or do a little bit more of an advanced setup, I have a video about my indoor greenhouse, and it does have the links to the lights and all that kind of stuff underneath that. But yeah, so to start your plants, so when you first planted your seeds, your couple seeds in here, you gave it a good water, you can put them on a heating mat. So this heating mat is about $40 on Amazon. I'm sure you could get it cheaper elsewhere, but this is what this one was. And it basically is going to help your soil stay warm, because certain seeds like tomatoes, cucumbers, things like that, they love warm weather. So the warmer you can keep those seeds, the better germination rate you'll have, and sometimes the quicker that they germinate. So there's a cute little chart on here that tells you, kind of an idea. So for example, the tomato. So on the package, it says 7 to 10 days to sprout, but if you're using a heating mat, you can get in as little as 6 days. So you're helping those seeds to crack open, keeping the soil moist, keeping the moisture in and warm. So not necessary, but a great option, especially for seeds that love warm heat. The other option you can use are the lights. So these are just LED lights that I got on Amazon. And again, not necessarily, you can use a window, but these definitely help with consistency of light. So the problem sometimes people get with putting them in windows is there's either too much light or too little light. And what happens when there's not a consistent amount of light is your plants will start to stretch towards the light and they start to get what's called leggy. And sometimes it's hard to come back from that, because if they're stretching to try and get to that light and they're not getting the sufficient light, you're basically stretching those plants and kind of ruining them. So with this, it's a perfect way to, and these weren't super expensive. I think they were like $75 for 6 4-foot strips. You can get them in 2-foot strips to make them shorter, or to make them less expensive. You can attach them to shelving or other areas in your home. And yeah, it's gonna, like I said, it's creating that consistent light constantly for the 14 to 16 hours that it needs, no messing around. The other thing that's nice about it too is you can adjust it. So when your seeds, you want to keep the light, you know, if you have lights, to keep them a certain amount of distance away from your seedlings. So you want to keep it close enough so it's not going to stretch, and basically, yeah, just provide that consistent light. So grow lights, heat mat, definitely help the situation. Again, not necessary, but so nice to have. The other thing I said that was optional was a fan. So if you don't want to come in, like if you've got tons and tons of seedlings started, or if you just are going to forget to come in and run your hands across the plants, set up a fan. I have a fan here on the outside that I'm going to turn on, and I'm basically going to oscillate it in here, and it's going to blow and act like wind. So instead of me coming in here and having to run my hands, which I probably will anyways, because nothing's more exciting than running your hands through fresh plants, the oscillating fan will definitely help with that air circulation and for making sure those plants are getting like that wind element. So I hope that I've explained this well enough. This is a little bit of a longer video, but it's perfect for beginners because there's so many questions that a lot of people have, and it's kind of condensed all into one video, answering most of the questions that get asked. I see get asked over and over and over and over again. And yeah, hopefully that does it for you. If you do have any more questions, just pop them below. We are going to be starting our peppers and our tomatoes and stuff in the next week or so. I'm going to do a video on what I'm starting in March and what I'm starting in February. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll talk to you later. Bye.